Welcome to CNN Talk. Joe Biden has just entered the contest, Greg.
Shocker.
The worst kept secret in Washington.
Yeah, not a big surprise.
What did you think of the video?
The video was horrendous. It was classic exploitative. You know, it's just beating on an old topic, and he tried to exploit it to make him sound like this great statesman. I thought it was really silly, actually.
That's pretty clear. It was focused on Charlottesville, which is obviously
soft focus on Charlottesville.
one issue, but obviously a huge issue, and it brought up many sort of cultural questions about the United States. What do you think he was trying to do with that?
Yeah, Charlottesville is a carrier for a lot of things, and he used that as a defining moment of who we are, who Americans are. He kept saying that, and his candidacy is presumably a fight back and a reclamation of American values that aren't racist and anti-Semitic and authoritarian in the Trump style and in the style we saw unleashed in Charlottesville. However, I don't think he's going to gain much traction with that, precisely because he's like continuity Democrat. He's the status quo Democrat, and we're not in a status quo political era.
It was very aggressive, though, wasn't it, towards personal in relation to Trump, which could be an effective strategy because Trump has shown how he's going to be aggressive with whoever he's up against, so you might as well go back at him.
It's quite a difficult one, this, because in some ways you could argue that the best candidate would be the direct opposite of Trump, somebody who was fairly soft-spoken, not going to be aggressive at all. Or you could argue you need to have an aggressive person to take on Trump, and we won't know which one of those strategies will work and for quite a long time. I think Joe Biden is the wrong candidate at the wrong time. He, to my mind, hasn't really... there's no... Greg, you know far more about this than I do, but I couldn't actually put my finger on a single thing that Joe Biden's achieved in his, 40 years
He's got no record.
In political office.
And
he seems a nice guy,
Yeah.
slightly weird guy in some ways.
Crazy.
He is in his late 70s, and I mean, I don't want to be ageist, but you've got the three leading contenders in this race. Now, Trump in his early 70s, Bernie Sanders he's in his very late 70s. Biden is what, 76, 77?
I think older. Yeah.
Yes, I think he's about 76.
Is there, I mean, no one that the Democrats can put up that is going to be inspirational? Now, I'm sure Rachel will say that Bernie Sanders can be inspirational, and he's a rabble-rousing speech maker. But there's no sort of Kennedy, there's no Obama, there's no Bill Clinton, somebody who can really articulate the zeitgeist of the time.
There are, but they're way behind in the polls, aren't
Right. It's. I read a great line. They called it the arms race of crazy. And so the people that are sane, I'm going to throw out one, John Delaney, who seems like a perfectly sane center-left moderate Democrat. Can't get out of 1%. He's not even in the top 10. And this is a former congressman from Maryland, really likable guy, and he's sane. And unfortunately, it's now a race.
Why not? Why can't he move?
Because the party has been co-opted by what I would call the crazy left, the progressive left. Those are the ones getting the attention. Now, Nancy Pelosi, who's now all of a sudden become a moderate, elder stateswoman, she'll say, oh, it's only five of them. But they're the ones getting all the attention. And you can thank the Brett Kavanaugh hearings for some of that, and then just the media fascination with these people.
But actually, there's been lots of, there's been these town halls in the United States featuring a lot of these candidates, and I don't think the viewing figures have been that great. The American public don't seem necessarily engaged at this point with the Democratic race.
Well, it's interesting that, we talk about the progressives as some sort of crazy. Actually, they're in line with a consensus in the American public over policies and over politics. 76% of voters, according to Politico, would support a rise in taxes on the rich. 95% of Democrats, 86% of Republicans, according to a 2017 Pew poll, wanted an increase in Social Security. These are Democrat policies, and they cut across voters.
Right.
That's Republican voters as well, by definition.
The ones getting the attention are get rid of the border wall, get rid of ICE.
Statement.
It's
You're just going to bring it up, are you?
stuff.
Okay. Possibly the worst kept secret in Washington. Joe Biden has announced his candidacy for the presidency. He's going up against, I think, 19 other Democratic candidates who've declared. Can he beat Trump, we're asking. Here's a bit of his video.
I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are. And I cannot stand by and watch that happen. The core values of this nation, our standing in the world, our very democracy, everything that has made America America is at stake. That's why today I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States. Folks, America's an idea that's stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant.
You know, with Biden, you go like this, and he goes down.
My intention from the beginning is if I were to run, to be the last person to announce.
Crowded field, a lot of Democratic contenders.
Universal child care for every baby 0 to 5. Universal college.
I will give the United States Congress 100 days to get their act together and have the courage to pass reasonable gun safety laws.
And we're not talking about health care. We're not talking about raising the minimum wage to a living wage.
I just say whoever it is, I'll take them all.
Comments streaming in on our Facebook feed. Barassi says Trump is unbeatable. Tolave says Biden for USA. Nobody can beat Trump, says Manuel. I mean, it's all about Trump, obviously, this story. Welcome if you're listening on our podcast as well, Apple Podcasts. Look up CNN Talk. Before we move on to the real cynics on Biden and the video, Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a semi-cynic compared to this panel, I suppose. My problem with Biden is that he is continuity Democrats. He is the status quo. And, you know, politics in the US, much like across the world, has demonstrated that status quo politics is broken. So you can't counter a Trump or indeed any far-right candidate. In the UK, we're having the same discussion across Europe. Very much the same. How do you counter the resurgent far right? You can't counter that with status quo centrism. And that's why the Democrat candidates that have tacked leftward, primarily on economic policy, but not only, that is why they are doing so well, and that is why they're getting so much traction. Biden is not the person who can do that.
For those who don't know much about him, Ian, this is a quick bio. He is 76 years old. He was US Vice President, of course, and he's run twice before unsuccessfully.
I can remember his first run in 1988 where Michael Dukakis won. And I mean, if you couldn't beat Michael Dukakis, you probably don't have a lot about you. And his campaign burnt then over allegations of plagiarism, where he said he was the first Biden in 1,000 generations to go to university, directly lifting a part of a speech from British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock at the time. This was a major scandal, and that many had to quit the race. Since then, he's been in and around the upper reaches of American politics, but it's quite difficult to put your finger on many achievements. He was vice president for 8 years. Can anyone think in the Obama administration of anything that Joe Biden can say, this was my achievement? I certainly can't. I think it's a reflection on the Democrats that several of their candidates are sort of in their mid-70s. Now, in this country, that could not happen. You would not have candidates in their mid-70s for the highest office in the land. And in a sense, the Democrats are going through what the Republicans went through 4 years ago with this huge number of candidates. But they seem to be making the same mistake that the Republicans made. The Republican Party is less of a political party now as a sort of religious sect in some ways. It's driven... But, I mean, if I was in America, I would have always voted Republican up until the last 10 years, where I couldn't have voted Republican in the last 2 presidential elections. But looking at most of these candidates, I couldn't vote Democrat either. And so I think you've got this huge chunk of people in the centre ground of politics that find themselves excluded from both parties.
A huge amount of Democratic candidates, Greg. Here they are. There's 20 of them. Joe Biden isn't in that graphic, but these are the other 19. And you've got a full range of politics and types of people as well. The polls are interesting, though. So Biden, way out in front with Sanders. So whilst there's a big field, actually, there's only 2 front runners.
For now, and there's been a lot of movement in that 3, 4, and 5 position. Whenever someone announces, they get a lot of attention. They have a quick money-raising, binge, and then they disappear. Because
So
maybe
Biden
people
could
get
fall
bored of-
back now, you think?
Well, and I'm thinking more of the others. Biden might have some staying power. I agree. This is rare that I agree with Rachel, but no, you're absolutely right. He doesn't necessarily, he's not necessarily the right person at the right time. He is really a picture of the establishment, and he'll probably try to shake that. He'll say, yes, but I was part of the Obama administration, which won in 2008 against the establishment, against the Clinton, the Clinton canonization or the appointment. It'll be tricky, though, for him to divorce himself from the status quo establishment and attach himself to the Obama administration, because there's not a lot of great things that happened in the Obama years that he can point to either. So I'm not sure which tact he's going to take, but we'll see.
The video was quite aggressive. It was quite personal about Trump, which most candidates try to rise above him, but he was going in for the kill, really, and he used Charlottesville as the pivot. What did you make of that?
Well, I thought it was a bit shameless. Look, there are some vulnerabilities that the president has, for sure, and one of them is his ability to articulate things without insulting somebody or making a mistake. When he sticks to the script, he ends up being much more successful, like in the State of the Union address. Unfortunately, that's only once a year. So, look, I thought it was a little bit shameless. I would encourage people
Why is it shameless?
Well, because I think he's exploiting an event where there's a lot, was obviously not a good event or a great moment for America, right? So why don't you, celebrate D-Day, which was in the clip, celebrate something that's positive, not the miscommunication of the president. Granted, if you want to criticize him on that, that's fine. He's not an articulate man. We all get that. But get over it and start pick some policies to talk about.
Let me make an analogy here. We learned today that Ken Kirchhoff has died, the actor who played Cliff Barnes in Dallas. Imagine J.R. Ewing, Larry Hagman as the president, and then you've got the challenger, Cliff Barnes. Well, that's what we've got here. We've got Donald Trump as Larry Hagman, and you've got Cliff Barnes, who will do his best, put in a decent shot, but never quite gets
Do you want to
there.
translate that for a younger audience?
Yeah.
It's interesting because Politico picked up on this whole Biden playing the Obama legacy and basically being the Obama candidate. And they said, look, the problem with that is that he's not Obama, right? So
fundamentally, not
fundamentally, he's not
Tough act to
that
follow.
person.
Yeah.
A very tough act to follow. But he is the establishment candidate. And it's interesting when we look at, you've both raised this issue of age, and Bernie Sanders, when he talked to Fox News a few weeks ago, he pushed back on that, as you would expect. He said, look, it's not about age, it's about what you believe in. But I think the reason that we have this age gap is because we've had consensus politics. We've had 30 years of neoliberal consensus. Both the right wing and the left wing supported this economic and political consensus. And so all the candidates of that age, the political class of that age, bought into that. That's why we're seeing this symbiosis between the older generation of socialists and the millennial generation of socialists, because the ones in the middle, the generation in the middle is not there.
But a socialist candidate cannot become president. You will not win the presidency if you are a left-wing candidate. It just will not happen. Never has, never will.
Let's see
Even
about
Nancy
that.
Pelosi has rejected socialism and has tried to distance herself from the fringe.
And yet all the polling shows overwhelming public support for policies that are socialist in all but name.
Mainstream Democratic
higher tax
policies.
on highest
Of course.
earners,
Democrats
universal
have always
health care.
loved taxes, absolutely.
But these, it's not the Democrats that love them. It's the population at large that loves them,
Yeah,
and that's the
we
problem.
hear this all the time, and it's all very well. You quote polls, and people will say, "Oh, yeah, of course, I'd rather a rich person pays more than me." But when it comes down to the voting booth, they don't vote that way.
We are watching Twitter for one reason. Donald Trump, waiting for his response. He hasn't responded so far today, but in 2018, October, he did dismiss Biden, didn't he, as a contender?
Biden, I hear Biden wants to take me to the back of a barn. He would be in big trouble, I will tell you. Remember he said that? I'd like to take him. With Biden, you go like this, and he goes down. Biden. And the other ones.
The other ones, I mean, he's speaking to his base. He works his base really well. And the other ones, it's a useful narrative, that, isn't it? There's Biden, who he can discredit, and then the other ones.
Yeah, because, and again, I think it's the same problem the Republicans had in 2016. You know, the 14 dwarfs or whatever they were called. I mean, nobody's able to bust out of it. And if you look back, and I don't know if it's going to be Biden or Bernie, but at some point it'll be one candidate and everybody else. You know, so if you have 15 people splitting the not crazy vote, it's not going to work.
Does it mean we're going to see Obama as vice president, says Tez Falem on Facebook? It does raise the question about vice presidential candidates, and he could balance with a younger candidate. If you look at the others, to make himself more appealing, Kamala Harris, a lot of people talking about, for example, could that be an effective strategy if he comes out early and talks about his vice presidency? When does that work, by the way? When did that?
Well, 08, it worked for
straight
Obama.
after.
Yeah, it worked for Obama with Joe Biden. I don't know that you can do a repeat, though. That's tricky.
I don't think Biden can pull off a repeat. And to reiterate, he won't be able to pull it off because he's not offering anything that people can connect with. We're having a conversation, and you're calling this politics crazy. We're having a conversation as though 2008 never happened, as though we never had a financial crash, as though we're not still reeling from that, as though, look, when Elizabeth Warren launched her candidacy in February, she mentioned this explicitly. She said most people are still suffering from that economic damage. That's not just the working class. That's not just the unemployed. That is most people who are not managing in an economic system that has failed them. You're having a conversation
talking about America?
as though that never happened.
It's not true.
It's not.
Okay.
The American
America.
economy is absolutely booming at the moment.
And people are not feeling the effects.
Well, they absolutely are. Since Trump has been president, employment figures have increased exponentially.
Okay.
Average incomes have increed
That's just
exponentially. I mean, well, the figures are proof that I'm right on that. You can't just say it's not true.
What the figures are showing is that the American economy is doing well. Nobody's denying that.
Well, you just did.
No, I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is that people are not feeling the effects. We have economic disparity. What has happened since 2008 is a widening of the wealth gap, and that is the case across the West. That is why we're seeing so much agitation on the right, and that is why we're seeing the left try to push
Trump was
back
elected,
with a
because
progressive economic policy.
It's one of the reasons Trump was elected is during the Obama years, only the 1% gained, right? Because you had zero interest rates, so if you owned financial assets and real estate, you made money. If you worked in the real economy, you lost. In 2016, Trump came in, now the real economy is bouncing. You've got wage growth of 3%. Bottom quartile wage growth was 4%. So the lower quartile is making more money, or at least experiencing more wage gains. It's indisputable. If there's always going to be some politics of envy, even in the United States, but it's not going to work.
It's not politics of envy when people can't get to the end of the month without worrying. That is not politics of envy. That's just an economic reality that most people across the West are experiencing as a result.
It is not
most people.
most
It is most
4%
people.
wage gains?
I don't know what world you
There
live
was this
in,
whole thing about
Rachel,
how
but
the
it is
middle
not
class
most people
have
that are
no
experiencing
money
that.
in
There
reserve.
are people right at the bottom who are in dire straits. I completely accept
Always
that.
have.
But when you say most people, you're talking about presumably the majority of the population. That is not the experience of the majority of the population.
So there was this whole thing, both in the US and in the UK in the last few years, where, you know, people were really shocked that the middle class, people who were expected to do well, have nothing in reserve. So if something went wrong, like if the gas boiler broke or the car broke down or they needed some payment, they would very quickly go into debt within a month. That is not doing well. That is doing worse than the generation before, and that is the problem.
You're painting a very inaccurate picture. But
It's not me painting that.
Can I just say one word about that Trump video that you showed? Because I think that is exactly the right strategy for him to almost ridicule Joe Biden. And there is so much that you can ridicule about Joe Biden. The plagiarism, I mean, OK, that was a long time ago. All these sort of various...
He's had a long career.
Yeah, these touchy-feely scandals that have happened. The fact that, I mean, that hairpiece... I mean, a lot of people, I think they look at pictures of Joe Biden over the years and they see, where does this hair come from? And you think, well, that may be completely a facile thing. But people do notice things like that, and Donald Trump will point them out.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just have another quick clip from the video because you enjoyed it so much.
Yes, we did.
We don't have one.
Oh, no.
We've used it all up.
I want to watch it again
so
so much.
It is on his Twitter feed if you need it. We're still watching for Trump's Twitter feed as well. Let's just show Joe Biden's Twitter feed, because literally the moment he declared, he brought out his logo. Any thoughts on that?
Meh.
Yeah.
Joe 2020.
Standard.
Pretty clear. Standard.
Yeah, I mean, catchy. You know, nothing wrong with that. No shame.
Well, there you go.
But what
Something
do,
positive
what
from
do
Greg
the
on
red
Joe Biden.
lines signify? We've got a new political
the
party
E.
in this country, Change UK, and
Joe.
they've got black lines, and nobody knows what they signify.
Biden president.
I wonder how much that costs, though, that logo design.
Yeah, a
Probably quite
lot
bit,
of
right?
focus grouping.
Yeah.
Jacqueline thinks Biden will bring dignity back to the presidency. Tenacious
Up to a
BC
point.
says any honest person should be able to beat Trump. Why not Biden? What do you think? Let us know on our Facebook feed. Cameron saying he's Hillary 2.0, but he's distinctly
Good way
not,
of
is
putting
he?
it.
Yeah,
As
because
an
he's part of the
establishment figure.
establishment.
Yeah.
He's been around for 30+ years. He's got not a lot to show for it. I mean, he's entrenched. I mean, I don't know how you can shake that. And
Obama won largely because he had a one-word policy platform, hope.
Yeah.
And it was vacuous,
It's been
but
changed.
people liked
Yeah.
that, liked the optimistic feel. And this is where I think a lot of the Democrats are going to fall into a trap. It'll all be your sort of gloom and doom. Oh, everybody's going to hell in a handcart, the economy's terrible.
Don't do that.
Aren't we all sort of paying too much tax and all the rest of it? Or aren't the rich paying not enough tax?
Thanks.
That is not an inspirational message. That doesn't get people to vote for you. Think back to Reagan in 1980, 1984. He won because of a message of optimism. Kennedy did in 1960. All the successful campaigns put forward a message of hope and optimism. I don't think Joe Biden's capable of doing that.
No, I agree that he's not, and I also agree with you that you need to give people
God.
hope, and that is
Stop the
why
press.
a candidacy that will focus only on Trump, excuse me, will not succeed. And the thing about this
calling the
doom,
president
this
a
doom and
tramp.
gloom, it was a bit of a slip.
Yeah, Freudian.
The thing about the Democrat message that is left, you know, the leftward turn from Bernie and the other.
Had a whole 10 seconds you gave up.
I
That's
couldn't
not
have-
the,
oh,
that's
well,
not the secret to this show. Welcome back to CNN Talk. We're talking about Joe Biden's entry to the presidential race. As Ian was saying, he's had a long career. There's lots of things that Donald Trump will be able to pick out and attack him on. Let's just show you Lucy Flores. Now, she talks about what specifically was she said he kissed her on the back of the head during the 2014 campaign event. It made her feel uneasy, gross, and confused. And it does seem as though this is a sort of a thing for him. Because here's another image from Stephanie Carter, but she said she didn't feel uncomfortable about this particular moment. She felt supported by him.
Is that the hair sniffing incident?
It's not a great visual, is
Doesn't
it?
sniff some hair.
We're just going to hear from Joe Biden in response to these claims that he made women feel uncomfortable, and then we can discuss.
It wasn't my intent to make light of anyone's discomfort. I realize my responsibility is to not invade the space of anyone who is uncomfortable in that regard. And I hope it wasn't taken that way. But there was, I literally think it is incumbent upon me, I think everybody else, to make sure that if you embrace someone, if you touch someone, it's with their consent.
Does that explain those images to you?
Oh, I don't
And
know.
allegations?
They're not great images, are they? The visuals look distinctly off, and
sure it's
I
fair.
feel like I would feel quite uncomfortable in that
She didn't,
situation.
and that's the point. She didn't feel
Indeed, that's true.
uncomfortable. And I mean, look, some people are touchy-feely. Some people are a bit hands
Several women did feel uncomfortable, but
Yeah,
Right.
this particular one.
Yeah, and it's amazing that it didn't come out before. And I think that's what's going to be very interesting about this one. Biden will be pushed to the left by his competitors in these primaries. He's also going to have the focus of the press. Normally, the press is just beating on President Trump and sort of elevating his opponents, right? But now it's going to be really looking into each candidate. There aren't going to be Republicans to bash. So they're really going to look under the hood on him. And that's one of the things that came out. It's interesting that he's been doing this for 10 years and nobody really made a big deal about it.
has he undermined his ability to attack Trump on some of the, sexual allegations
Possibly.
about
I think
him?
the argument should be, I'm guilty. He's apologizing for a lot of things, not just this thing. He's apologizing for Clarence Thomas. He's trying to rewrite history and apologize. I think that's weak. But he's also saying that, I'm guilty, but not as guilty as Trump, which is
Yeah, it's not
arguably true. I mean, Trump has probably got a more unpleasant record than Biden does on these things. But is it a big deal? Yeah, it probably is.
Louise says a female candidate is the way to go. That's been tried before.
Yeah.
A lot of people suggesting, when Clinton and Obama sort of rub up against each other, America is ready for a black president before a female president. Do you think that's still true?
Personally, I don't think it matters whether the candidate's white, Latino, black, female, male, whatever. It's got to be the right person. And people in the media, I think we all obsess about sort of, oh, well, it's got to be a woman this time, or it's got to be a black man this time, or a black woman this time. Somebody will emerge in the end as the consensus candidate. Now, it may not be the... Well, it might be a white... I mean,
that's the consensus.
I mean,
so far,
white men still can sort of get positions in society. I mean, it might not last that much longer, but it does still happen.
Yeah.
We're future-proofing there.
Agreed.
Let's show you this video of Joe Biden and President Obama running around the White House, just because we can. This was in response to a campaign. I think it was Michelle Obama trying to encourage people to sort of get fit. But actually, it went down quite well for Biden at the time. So it shows some character. We'll just listen in, shall we? Dogs.
Man, you're hard to keep up with.
You can play out there. But after a good workout, got to drink up.
All right.
Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble with Jill and Michelle.
Just let Michelle know I did do this, all right?
Same time next week?
Same time next week.
All right.
Should they have worn suits? That's my question.
Not if...
No one wants
Harmless.
to see Joe Biden in a tracksuit.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
true.
do you want to
So-
see them running around in a shirt and tie instead?
I mean, I think, again...
Put your trainers on, at least.
I think that was quite a nice thing to have
harmless,
done. I mean, it's
absolutely
harmless,
harmless.
it was
Yeah,
quite
nice.
funny.
No shame.
Some people say, oh, it's not very presidential. Well, actually, I don't think it does them any harm at all to do things like that. Obama was brilliant at that. There were one or two other sort of little skits that he did.
Yeah.
Obama
Very
made
impressive.
Biden cool as well, didn't he? Like, there was a whole series
Yeah.
of memes with them both.
Yeah.
Like, they became this meme double act. And so the Obama magic did kind of spread to Biden.
But you
a
still
little
come
bit
back
in
to
that
the
context.
fact, what did Joe Biden achieve
Well, yeah.
in 8 years as
Well,
vice
what I'm going to
president?
say, this often happens when we talk about Russian stories, but we've got a huge amount of support coming in for Joe Biden.
Ah.
Lots of people are very supportive of him on the Facebook feed. Lots of people talking about dignity, and he can bring back dignity to the office.
I'm not sure he's the right guy for that, but it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
So, and I would argue in the group of the long list of Democrats that are running, he's in that small group of not fringe, not kind of loony progressive left, and I think that will.
You've got to stop calling it crazy. It's not like if the majority of the population supports those policies,
which
that
is
you
not
can't
true.
call them crazy.
Which is absolutely not true.
I just showed you the
because,
stats.
No, because you're always going to say when an pollster asks you, "Do you want to tax the rich?" Of course, but I'm not
so
sure.
they say things
tearing
that you
down
think
existing
are crazy.
border walls and abolishing ICE and expanding the size of the Supreme Court so it's more weighted toward the left. Those are pretty crazy fringe left ideas. It's just fact.
I mean, Biden will lead the polls at the moment because everyone's heard of him. I mean, that's always the case. At this point in the presidential race, you always get the most well-known ones at the top. But there will be people over time who emerge. It may be none of those 19 on that list. It may be somebody
also, a lot of
completely
people
new.
talking about the team. You know, it's effective. You know, you've got to think about the vice president as well, don't you? Vincent saying Biden, O'Rourke. Norbert saying Biden and Sanders. Biden and Buttigieg.
It's interesting that...
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting that some of these comments are mentioning dignity.
Yes.
That seems
Lots
to
of
be
something
that is very important. And you can see why, because, you know, for so many Americans, they will feel like the presidency has been debased and undermined and, you know, essentially insulted the office by Trump.
Second time I've agreed with you today. Yeah,
Well,
I think that's
that's
it.
a record,
answer for you.
I think
I've got an answer as well.
Kevin's got an answer on the red lines. They're from the flag.
Are there? Oh, I suppose so. Yeah, but if you have to think about it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Here's a curveball.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama.
Yes.
Just
Now
imagine
you're
talking.
if she showed any interest in running, she would walk this.
She's written it off completely, hasn't she?
I think so. I mean, I don't know that she stated that formally, but it would. So I guess there's always a chance. But
Could she be VP?
yeah, I don't see why not. You know, she's not Barack, but you know, she seems perfectly likable, a nice family. You
That'd
know,
be a smart move, wouldn't it?
nobody's.
Because we know that they work together.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think she's terrific.
Radical enough, is
she's
she?
terrific. She's a great advocate for a lot of things, and I think she does have, you know, that charisma, that X factor. You know, a lot of people commented on it.
speaker.
She was in the UK recently on tour with her book, and a lot of people made that observation that she has that.
Her ratio
that
of
factor.
mistakes to you know, relatively decent accomplishments is pretty low. I mean, you know, she didn't really trip up too much.
No, I thought she was a
Yeah.
fantastic
Yeah.
First Lady,
Yeah.
and I
No,
think she's
absolutely.
inspirational.
Yeah.
Her book, 6 months after publication, is still number 1 or 2 in the Sunday Times bestseller charts in
Yeah.
this country now, and I imagine it's the same in the New York Times bestseller list. She's got something. She's got that it factor, which
Yeah.
Biden doesn't
Does
have.
not
Yeah.
have, and it's
Clearly
it's
doesn't
hard to
have it.
follow Obama in that department. Obama was a really likable guy, obviously a phenomenal orator, and that's not Joe
But
Biden.
then can you have 2 Bushes, 2 Clintons, well, nearly 2
Yeah.
Clintons, and then 2 Obamas? It sort
Yeah.
of gets
But
sort
it's
of a
not
bit silly,
just
doesn't it?
it's
Yeah.
not just who you are; it's
Indeed.
what you're saying as well that
Sure.
counts.
Yeah.
Jeremy on Facebook says, if there's a recession in 2020, how much will that affect Trump's re-election campaign? Speaking to your point about the economy. And Linda says she's in Bangkok. Biden's got her absentee vote for sure. Do get involved in the discussion. Go back to our Facebook feed because it continues after the show and you can listen again to the podcast. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on TV, so many platforms these days.